Welcome to the PDX files. Each week we dive into the weird and the unexplained here in the Pacific Northwest and beyond. My name is Peach.
And I am Mac.
Mac, what are we talking about today?
Well, I mean, I think it's anybody who has watched maybe Ancient Lands or anything on YouTube has probably heard of this before. And there's been some reference to it in movies like Stargate. The Annunaki is what we're going to be talking about today. And this is only scratching the surface.
All right, so this is just part one of this where we dive into the Anunnaki. And as
Maybe several episodes, yeah, because it's
yeah,
really it's a deep, it's a kind of a deep topic, and something that I think folks find really really interesting, and we're gonna give it its due.
all right. Well, as usual, I haven't seen this video, so my reactions will be very real. And let's go ahead and get into it.
Why the mystery around Sumeria, which was in Mesopotamia and what's now modern-day Iraq? After all, here are just some of what they gave us. The modern calendar, based on lunar cycles, the 60-20 counting system used for geometry and measuring time, the wheel, the plow, irrigation systems like levees and canals, sailboats. They even spoke the first known language. And, most importantly, they left evidence of the first recorded writing. That's a lot of intelligent contributions to humanity. So why aren't we taught more about this clearly advanced and influential civilization? Well, connect the dots and you'll discover why the omission could be deliberate. Sumerians were accurate in creating many advanced systems, yet we dismiss their history of man as mere mythology. And why is that? Well, if we gave the same credibility to their written history as we've given their inventions, we'd be teaching a completely different version of our origins. And we'd be thinking a lot more about what our future may hold.
No, I 100% agree with her. The only one problem is she sounds like Carol Baskin from the Tiger King, but let's just leave that there. But it is something that I think we've all I don't know about in the Philippines. Do they teach history about the Mesopotamia as being kind of the cradle of civilization? Is that accurate there as well?
I have absolutely no memory of being taught that Mesopotamia was the
The cradle
beginnings
of
of
civilization.
civilization. That
Yeah.
was a long time ago, Mac.
Well, I know, but I mean, I'm not that much younger than you are, and I remember it being taught very heavily here that Mesopotamia was kind of the cradle of civilization and had all these amazing things. They talked about the first written language of cuneiform, I think is how you pronounce it. And I remember as a kid being really fascinated by, how similar some of the myths, and there's I can't remember the name of the book. It's a lot of poetry, kind of similar to the Greeks did later on, but the similarities of their origin stories versus the Bible. But
Right.
that's a little sneak preview there.
Right on. We'll continue here. And yes, I'm sorry. For the record, I do remember being taught that Mesopotamia was the cradle of civilization.
Okay, good. It's good that the propaganda made it around the
I
world.
mean,
It's
come
good.
on, the Philippines, we were very advanced there. We had no choice because we had no color TV, so we
I had no color TV when I was growing up. Come on now, we're talking about generations.
all right, here we go.
In 1849, a British archaeologist discovered 14 tablets in Sumeria. To date, these are the oldest known writings, and they date back to the 24th century BC. While the stories on them share much of what other ancient writings say, they put a whole new spin on the other ancient sacred texts. You see, while they do refer to a father of all beginnings, or some kind of ultimate supreme being, the tablets say that the creators in Genesis, the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, these were polytheistic gods of ours, otherworldly beings, or Just plain out, they were aliens. The entire first 2 tablets explain who they were and where they were from. Tablet 3 tells of the 6 days of creation, or settlement, on Earth. Later, they explain how the human race was genetically manipulated by these beings and did not evolve randomly. Even the technology Sumerians gave us came from these beings. Are you interested now in knowing more about what the Sumerians had to say about our history?
Yeah, I kind of left it in there because I'm actually really interested in what she has to say, but she speaks with so much like a bit of a condescension and kind of like this saying things from on high that I just let's say, "Are you interested? Are you interested?" Yeah, I am interested, but I don't need you to tell me that. I'm just keep on going. Just simmer down now is what I wanted to say to her, if possible.
But one of the things that she mentioned during that little segment there is that even though, for instance, the Christian doctrines teach of, I'm sorry, I guess, yeah, the Christian doctrines teach of, um, one God, the Yahweh or whatever, but it's
Yeah.
actually more of a polytheistic origins. Is based on a polytheistic origin story.
It has huge influence on all sorts of future religions that the world is seeing, and obviously because it's the first written a part of it. It's not just like it's sang by bards at around a campfire. It's actually like the first written language that we're aware of anyway has been able to sort of get that stuff down, and it's really interesting. And so I think that's why it has so much influence beyond just again, just rumors or lore. You, people learn to read that, and then it was passed down generation to generation. Then eventually, did sort of become kind of the telephone game again until you got more written language. But it was it all seems so. And again, if you read the oh god, if the producer could look up the name of the uh, not the Anunnaki, but the
The
kind of the
Book of Enoch.
Bible, kind of yeah, and well, maybe that's what it was, but it was like it's the creation story of the Sumerians,
Yeah, the Book
based.
of Enoch.
Yeah, thank you. That
Yeah,
and look at the similarities between even some Greek mythology, but certainly Christian mythology, and even in the Jews, even before that. So it's a story is passed down across generations. Now was this there is some some folks who have found evidence of floods. There are some folks who have found evidence of certain biblical things happening, but that could just be like total coincidence as far as like natural discovery, looking at the natural world. But it's a fascinating and again, if you haven't read it, the Book of Enoch, you definitely should because you're going to be kind of blown away.
all right. Well, let's go ahead and continue with this video. And you might be jumping ahead too much a little bit
Probably
um, on this
as I always do, but
on this discussion. So
we'll
let's
just
continue.
we'll just let Carol Baskin take it from here.
According to the Sumerian tablets, 445,000 years ago, creator gods, as they call it, came to Earth. The only inhabitants of Earth were wild and undomesticated animals, and early ancestors of man.
Hey,
These beings were called the Annunaki, which means those who from heaven to earth came. The Anunnaki inhabited a distant orbiting planet called Nibiru, which only entered our solar system every 3,600 years. They describe Nibiru as many times the diameter of Earth and abundant with iron oxide, making its rivers and lakes appear red. Now a side note about Nibiru. According to the tablets, Nibiru's atmosphere began to deteriorate and become a hostile place for life, and in order to restore it, the Anunnaki needed one important element for their atmosphere: gold. Now here are a few interesting facts. There is proof that gold nanoparticles can be used to repair our damaged ozone. It shields radiation, which explains why NASA uses gold foils in their space stations.
Ah,
I didn't
While
know that
NASA is
either.
currently aware of 8 official planets in our solar system, there has been much speculation about the wobbly orbit of 2 planets, which points to the likely gravitational pull of a very large mass, which has yet to be discovered.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I do know that there's from some folks who really are into the Anunnaki theory that the whole idea of gold is like a real big piece of that, and looking for other places that that have gold. And again, we're gonna get that, we're gonna get into some of that into maybe a future episode about the Anunnaki. But I did not realize. I guess I should have. I probably have read it at some point. I didn't know that NASA was using gold as a way to reflect radiation. That's actually pretty fascinating. I
yeah,
totally forgot about that.
definitely seen photos of those, those whatever. What do you call those?
Like the
Satellites,
lunar,
satellites and lunar orbiters and stuff like that
yeah,
with gold.
yeah.
And I never definitely did not put two and two together on that one until just now.
I mean, obviously, that's why what's it? Goldschlager is so popular because it protects your liver apparently from everything else.
It probably does not, though.
It definitely does not.
All right, we'll continue here. Find the spot.
Called the super Earth that came home for dinner, stating there are now 5 different lines of observational evidence pointing to the existence of Planet 9. If you were to remove this explanation and imagine Planet 9 does not exist, then you generate more problems than you solve. Clearly, there is potential of another planet yet to be discovered in our solar system. Now, when the Anunnaki arrived, they were capable of living lives that spanned hundreds of thousands of years. They created a mining settlement they called Eriduk, Earth Station 1, in the Persian Gulf, under a leader named Enki. The tablets convey, after a kingship descended from heaven, it was in Eriduk. These visitors were not alone. They brought another extraterrestrial race with them. They were called the Ajiji, and they worked as their slaves. The Ajiji were considered inferior. They served the Anunnaki by mining gold. As civilizations grew, the Ajiji endured crushing labor. And these stories are consistent with Babylonian tablets from the 18th century BC. When the gods, manlike, bore the labor, carried the load, the gods' load was great, the toil grievous, the trouble excessive. The great Anunnaki made the Ajiji undertake the toil.
I mean, that seems legit to me. I mean, I figure if you're kind of a superior race, you're kind of probably, it's kind of like, how we have the, what is it, the Alaskan great race with the Huskies or whatever. Human beings couldn't possibly cross it themselves across the frozen tundra, but they got these Huskies. They're gonna whip them into shape and move, like sort of move. I mean, it is kind of the arrogance that you might expect from maybe a slightly superior race.
Right.
Uh, I know that we kind of maybe discussed previously the idea of the Jinn versus these folks. I mean, and they definitely seem like lower if they have to rely on another race to do their work for them. Yeah, that seems like they're definitely not quite as high up as the Jinn. But it's kind of an interesting theory. And again, there's a lot of echoes. And again, if you have seen the movie, maybe you haven't, you have. It's a good movie. Stargate kind of delves into this a little bit, not on a very deep. It isn't like I'll right out and say it on the Anunnaki, but there's a lot of parallels to it. And I don't know. It's not a good story the way it's going right now. If you kind of get me, you kind of get my drift.
Well, yes, the uh, the thought of life on Earth. I mean, sorry, a little bit of a stretch here, but you know how there's this theory of panspermia, where
Right.
life actually did not begin, was not born from Earth. It actually came to Earth from somewhere
Makes
else,
sense. It
right?
does
And
make
so
sense. Yeah.
this is kind of a little bit telling that story a little bit, where maybe not necessarily life, but the way maybe humans evolved is because of these Anunnaki. Not necessarily no. I don't really know where the AGG really fit into the to this right now. But what's interesting is that they apparently came from a planet that what like appears every 5,000 years or whatever. I can't remember now what it said, but
Something like, I think it was 3,600 years, but
yeah,
I think if you look at it, you remember when we talked a long time ago about the um, what's the telescope,
James Webb.
the James Webb finding evidence of like a dark mass out in our solar system somewhere.
Yeah.
That sounds eerily similar to what they're talking about, like this dark planet, this ninth planet that can't necessarily be seen, but maybe because
Ah,
of technology, they're able to sort of hide themselves.
cloaking
I
device.
Yes, and I could be full of shit. Probably not. But I mean, if you look at it, the idea of sort of connecting this two, it kind of makes sense. So either there's like a giant massive black hole in our solar system, we're all going to die, or there's a planet who may be inhabited by some fairly sophisticated beings who can cloak a planet, and it doesn't seem like it's that far fetched. But yeah, I mean, who knows? I'm just out
But
here saying things.
yeah, and also, obviously, I want to note that the Anunnaki apparently used slaves to do their dirty work,
They're
or not
not
the dirty
good.
work, but the work that's required in order to get the gold that they need to fix their planet.
Yeah, and I mean, it kind of
Tale as
ties
old as
in.
time.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, and that is that way. But the thing is that they kind of determine how gold exists and why it has been created because of the different sun. The sun can create gold. It's not like the earth just like shits it out like the golden goose. But if you kind of look at the kind of the where we're kind of going with this, it's like we're not in it. It's not a pleasant thing that the Anunnaki could be, at least in my opinion, it could exist. It's not a good thing in any way.
Wait, what do you mean? Because of
They're using us to like as slaves essentially, and then when they're done with us, they'll let us go. But there's also the kind of the theory that there is like various alien races visiting us, so maybe the Anunnaki were one of them, and there's
yeah,
others who kind of like have sort of like balance it all out so that we're not slaves. They're kind of looking after us, but it's a very interesting concept.
yeah, right on. Okay, we'll continue.
After many centuries, the Ajiji rebelled, mistakenly believing they could overcome these oppressive masters. Their defeat almost completely annihilated their race, leaving the Anunnaki without a workforce. Unable to replace the Ajiji, Nibiru's ruler, Anu, ordered his son Enki to genetically engineer a new slave race,
Hmm.
one that was intelligent enough to perform complex work but still be subservient to the Anunnaki. His experiments are recounted in detail in Atrahasis. Many unique creatures were created. Enki finally successfully met his goal, and the result? A genetic hybrid between Earth's caveman, Homo erectus, and the Anunnaki themselves. This hybrid we call Homo sapiens.
There you
Hmm.
go.
The
Yeah, they
tablets,
kind of.
called first men the Adamu. In Hebrew,
Hey.
Adam means man.
Oh.
The Anunnaki put the Homo sapiens to work in the mines and elsewhere in Mesopotamia. The Semitic word avad, or worship, literally means work for. Hence, early man had no choice but to worship their gods. According to the pictographs and texts, these Anunnaki, who we know lived many centuries, were giants compared to the Homo sapiens. Now, because their main purpose in life was to serve the Anunnaki, Homo sapiens were, in return, educated with social skills and academic affairs and technology. All this is abundantly clear in the tablets. The new human slaves were sterile, but as the demand for workforce increased, they were re-engineered so that they could reproduce. This later led to an overpopulation. So later, many humans were banished from the safety of their cities, giving rise to the story of the Garden of Eden and the story of banishment from paradise for procreating.
So it's almost like when they're trying to have the one-child policy. It's almost like that, right? It's like, y'all had too many
Almost.
kids. Get the fuck out. We don't have room for you
Almost, yeah.
motherfuckers. Yeah. I mean, again, if you look at it, it's almost Naziistic, like the kind of that's not a word, but kind of what, it's like ethnic cleansing and like, selective breeding and those types of things.
Eugenics.
Eugenics, yeah, thank you. It's like a lot like that, and
Yeah.
but all in service of a god, right? That is, at least in my opinion, if that is our god, that's not a good god. That's not a good god that I want to try to follow.
Right. So the parallel to the Christian and probably other doctrines of the main God. I'm sorry. So first of all, there are quite a few religions that have multiple gods. So Hinduism is one of
Yep.
those religions that have multiple gods.
Yep.
The Shinto has a lot, which is the Japanese belief, also have multiple gods and goddesses. But the translation
The
in the
Greeks,
Christian
yeah, the
faith,
Romans, yeah.
the translation of the Christian faith only being one God. I wonder if that's the Enki character in
Yeah,
this
I think
particular
so.
thing.
Yeah, I think so. And the it seems like a bit of a tenuous grasp to say that, it was, the Garden of Eden, because like how good could it have been if you're just like mining for the gods? How is that the fucking Garden of Eden? At least in my opinion, I'd want to get the fuck out of there too,
Well,
as
but
quick
but
as
again,
possible.
yeah, but they're
Mm.
like Enki and these Anunnaki
Yeah, they're
are
giants and they're protecting them and all this other.
no, but also they punished the Homo sapiens for doing something that they designed them to do, which is to procreate. And the reason they designed them to procreate is because they wanted more slaves to mine for gold.
Going for gold, yeah, yeah.
That's it.
It's an interesting theory. It really
It's a
is. I mean,
vengeful god.
which ties into 100% to the Old Testament. 100%. I mean, if you read the Old Testament, that is a vengeful motherfucking God right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. I mean, it's sounding there's sounding to be a lot more parallels here for sure.
Yep.
All right, let's continue. This actually, we're bringing it home here for this part one.
As humans evolved to become more intelligent, some Anunnaki leaders bred with these humans.
Oh, there you
The
go.
children which resulted from these forbidden unions between races were called the Nephilim, or giants of old. Tablets say that these practices enraged Enlil, the Anu leader of that time, who was also the brother of Enki. Enlil wanted to ensure no human would ever rise to power and potentially rule Nibiru. Naturally, the interbreeding increased that risk, but it was beyond his control. Human populations increased over the following millennia, only to be met with a population control plan that nature had in store. During one of its 3,600-year cycles, Nibiru's orbit created havoc on the Sun and on Earth. Nibiru is also called the Destroyer in the Colbrin, which is an ancient gospel found in Scotland that was omitted from biblical text, much like the Dead Sea Scrolls were. It reads, "Men forgot the days of the destroyer. Only the wise know where it went, and that it shall return at the appointed time. The destroyer, its color, bright and fierce and ever-changing, was an unstable appearance, a fierce body of flames." Though stating Nibiru usually passes without causing harm, the tablets describe one cataclysmic event which occurred when Nibiru neared Earth. It says, first, black spots appeared on the sun's surface. The Earth's magnetic field became weaker, the temperature rose, and ice caps began melting. This event we call the deluge, or the Great Flood.
Right. So I don't think it actually stated it in those terms necessarily, but you can interpret, I guess, that from some of those, those cuneiform tablets. It is interesting that, the flood myth really did originate with the Sumerians.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's, I don't think you can really dispute that. I mean, I think yes, you can if you're, uh, really into one of those other religions, but it's 100% a match, almost 100% match as to why and what happened with the flood myth. You just have to read it. It's not that a step too far. Along with some of the other, I think, religious myths and legends directly related to the Book of Enoch. It's a fascinating read. It's a fascinating idea to think about it from, again, kind of going back to the last episode where you're looking at like extra dimensional beings, or
Mhm.
and maybe an explanation of why we're here and the things that we see and do and have access to. So I mean, I think while I don't think that necessarily is all true, I'm not opposed to the belief that if you look at it from a scientific perspective, that there are other beings called the Anunnaki who kind of created us, and we're kind of a science experiment.
Created us. We're a science experiment. They showed us technology. They provided us with the means to advance
Education,
our
yeah,
technology. And it's interesting, of course, when for the people who are watching us on YouTube, the depictions of the civilization in the beginning of the video, that's advanced. Back then, that was advanced. Obviously, if you compare that to the skyscrapers of today, it's obviously very different. But you know, pyramid structures notwithstanding, it's the technology that the Anunnaki allegedly, or the alleged Anunnaki provided to mankind, that kind of got us to where we are today. And when it comes to what you're talking about, and I think we're kind of jumping a little bit ahead, and I know this is only part one, but yes, there's definitely some parallels to of the Anunnaki story that is evident in the Christian Bible, in the probably
there's
in the
there's even more than
Quran,
what we've shown. Yeah,
and
there's even more
and
than we've
and
shown
in a
today.
lot of other doctrines and a lot of other faiths.
Yeah,
And yeah, it has to go beyond coincidence. This is something that's been passed on, or maybe even experienced by the ancestors of these particular ethnicities and races. And there's also a lot of Native American stories that also talk about a huge the
very similar.
deluge.
Yep,
Exactly, very similar kind of creation stories. And when you compile all that and collate that, it probably boils down to this Anunnaki and the Book of Enoch, and and the creation of man via this manner.
yep, 100%. And even with Native Americans, I mean, they kind of have their own way, and it's more advanced in cave than like caveman art. They
Yeah,
have their own stories and traditions that were passed down, and there's a certain power to something like that. I think that is a little underrated. It's not just some asshole singing. And again, I kind of equate to the bard singing about blah 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 blah, blah, blah. But there's these stories that they used to tell, um, to their families, pass it down generation to generation. Could it be a game of telephone? Maybe, but I think there's a lot of the facts that if you try to look at it from a scientific perspective, that's the difference. It's like you don't look at it from just like, oh, this is just some weirdo yelling on the corner. It's like this is stories, traditions that are passed down across generations. I think you can equate it to scientific
Yeah.
examination and find out, and they really have. There has been a deluge. It's not just, maybe it wasn't divine, maybe it was just climate change, but I think the idea of a flood is not that crazy. Maybe Noah's Ark's kind of stupid, but I think the idea of a flood is not crazy.
No, it's not crazy. And that the, the weather or the climate conditions that led to the flood being born from the Nibiru coming close to the sun and kind of causing all this causing havoc that way.
Right.
Very, very plausible, because that's exactly what we're kind of experiencing now. Oh,
We
it's kind of
definitely.
funny. I wonder if this is like a slow coming back of Nibiru is what we're experiencing now with climate change.
Yeah, that's exactly what brought back Trump for sure.
Well, anyway, so the story of the Anunnaki is a very lengthy and complex and very much big as an epic. And so this is why this is only part one, but we definitely will be coming back to it in future episodes. So if you enjoy this content, please give it a like and share it across your socials to help get the word out about our show. If you hadn't already done so, please subscribe. And on YouTube, hit that notification bell to make sure you don't miss out on future episodes. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.